So today I want to make a rosehip and caramel ripple ice cream, which we're going to start in a bit, but I've got my rosehips here, which I picked down the lane. And then we're going to make a hazelnut frangipane and Victoria plum tart. The plums I got from a neighbour, and then the hazelnuts, I mean, you could use ground almonds, you can use cob nuts if you could get them, you can use wild hazelnuts when they come out. And we're going to make a little bit of sweet paste for the bottom of the tart as well. So to start, just for the sweet paste, I've got the recipes will all be available, the quantities at the end, but in a bowl I have flour, caster sugar and butter, which I'm going to pop into my mixer paddle attachment and just mix until we have a nice breadcrumb consistency. And then my rose hips, I've topped and tailed them. Inside you have these hairs and pips that I think people called itchy backs, and at school they would put them down people's t-shirts to make their backs itch. So it's really important to either remove them or to make sure you use a really fine sieve once you've cooked it to sieve them all out, otherwise you will end up with an itchy throat. I don't have the patience to remove them all, so I'm going down the sieve method and I'll show you that in a minute. So I'm just going to weigh my rose hips, see how many I've got. I've got 350 grams there. I'm going to add some caster sugar, 150 grams. I'm going to taste it afterwards because we want quite a nice sweet puree. And then some apple juice, roughly 200 mils. And I'm going to pop this on to a medium heat to bring it up to a simmer and cook them out, and then we're going to puree them. The sweet paste mix has reached a breadcrumb consistency. I've got one egg here that I've just beaten up lightly, and I'm going to pop that in and let it just start come together, and I will finish it by hand so it doesn't overmix. So here's my finished sweet paste, which I just kneaded briefly by hand to bring it together. I've made it into a round shape, and I'm just going to cling film it, pop that in the fridge for at least half an hour before I roll it out to cut some discs for my tart bases. For the hazelnut frangipane, I'm going to start by weighing 3 eggs. The reason I do it like this is because all eggs are different sizes. So if I know the weight, I can calculate my sugar and butter. So I've got 150 grams of eggs there. So I want 150 grams of butter. Hang on. And 150 grams of caster sugar. Essentially, this is Victoria sponge measurements. And I'm going to pop this onto my mixer with the paddle and cream the butter and sugar together. And then I'm going to gradually add my eggs, whisked up slightly, little by little, taking care to try not to split the mixture. So I've got my creamed butter and sugar and egg in this bowl. It looks very yellow because they're eggs from our chickens who free range, so they have especially yellow yolks. I've got 90 grams of ground hazelnuts. These were just hazelnuts in the skin that I ground myself, and it's a little bit lumpy, so I'm going to sieve it through. And I've got 90 grams of self-raising flour. So as I said, you could use ground almonds, you could use ground pecans, you could use foraged cob nuts. Hazelnuts, I think, work really well with the plums. They are coming into season now, and it's just a little bit different. I've got some little tartlet cases here, which I greased with some butter all the way around, and especially the sides. I rolled out my sweet pastry to 2 to 3 mils thick, and I've just cut a disc to fit inside the base of the tart. So I have a piping bag. I haven't put a nozzle in it because I don't need one. If you don't have a piping bag, you can just spoon in your mixture, but it will make it a little bit fiddly to get an even layer and to get a neat even layer. You could put some jam in, but I am not going to bother because I think it will just make it a bit sweet. And I'm just going to pipe in not even half, you know, just slightly under half level of my hazelnut frangipane mix. You don't have to use plums for this, but the plums are in season. You could use apples, you could use pears, you could use raspberries, whatever takes your fancy, really. For me, I definitely want more fruit than anything else in a tart like this, so I'm going to go for 5 quarters, well 6 if I feel like I can squeeze them in, of my stone plums. Yeah, let's go 6. The sponge is going to rise up around them, which is why I'm pointing them skywards as I pop the pieces in. Okay. So the final touch on these, I'm just sprinkling a few crushed up hazelnuts just for a little bit of texture, and it looks quite pretty. They'll cook into the top of the sponge when they're in the oven. I'm going to pop these in the oven at 170 degrees for 20 minutes initially, and then we'll see how they're looking. So here are the rose hips that I cooked earlier with the apple juice. I'm going to pop these into my liquidizer and then liquidize them on maximum so that I get a nice puree, which I'm then going to sieve. So I've liquidized the rose hips. This is called a chinois in kitchen language, and it is a really, really fine sieve. So I'm going to sieve the puree through here to get rid of all the little pips and the hairs that could irritate your throat. If you don't have a really fine sieve, then I would be inclined to remove the hairs and the pips before making your puree. So this is my rosehip puree. You can see it's super smooth, really nice and thick, lovely and glossy. I have tasted it and it's just perfect. It's nice and sweet, but still a little bit of an acidic kick from the rose hips. And I'm going to pop this in the freezer because I want it to just start freezing and be really, really cold so that when the ice cream is ready, we can ripple it through. So here are the little plum tarts coming out. You can see how much they've risen, so you definitely didn't want any more mix in there, otherwise it would have all come out the sides. We're just going to let these cool down a little bit and pop them out while they're still warm. If you let them get too cold, they could stick to the inside of the pan. If that happens, just pop them back into a hottish oven for a minute and they'll unstick and come out nicely for you. I'm quite excited about this recipe because I didn't think it would work as well as it has. So it's for my cheats, no ice cream machine is needed ice cream. It's hugely high in calories, So, you know, you've been warned. We're going to start off in a pan with 450 grams of double cream. I might even need another pot, we'll see. Could you pass me the other pot out the fridge, please? So this is the thick custard. I'm going to pour it into... I'm using a metal container because it will chill down quicker. You can see how nice and thick that is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cling film directly onto the surface of the custard, just to stop it from getting a skin, basically, and going lumpy. And now I'm going to set this into a tray with ice to let it get properly cool. Once it's cool, I'm going to whip 300 grams more of double cream, and I'm going to fold it through, and then the whole thing will go in the freezer to freeze. It will take several hours. This is an ice cream that I finished yesterday because we weren't going to get the ice cream fully frozen and finished in a day. So what I did was I took my base that we made earlier, I folded the whipped cream through it, put it in the freezer, let it freeze. Then I layered it up into another container with my red currant puree, my rosehip puree and this caramel sauce. I made this, and the recipe will be at the downloadable at the end of this video. I've got my plum tart and a little bit of hot water, and I'm just gonna, because it's just come out of the freezer, it is quite firm but it will soften up quickly enough. I'm going to get a nice scoop of caramel, rosehip and vanilla, pop that in the centre of my tart. I haven't rewarmed the tart up because they're fresh, they are nice enough. And because I happen to have some crushed up meringue in a container, I'm just going to put that round, but you don't have to. Another cheat you can do with this, you don't need to make the ice cream at all. You can just make the caramel sauce, and you can make the rosehip puree and buy a tub of ice cream from the shop and do exactly the same thing. Let it soften up a bit, dollop it into another container, get your nice marbled effect, pop it back in the freezer, and there you go. So that is a really nice seasonal semi-forage dessert.